Jeremy, thanks so much for joining us. Tell us a little bit about, and if I'm saying his name wrong, correct me, Cormonte Hamilton out of Memphis, Tennessee, this tight end who, based on the rankings, is the lowest ranked of the 2015 recruits, but I read your piece and you're very high on this kid. Why?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot about Cormonte that people are going to really like and they're going to identify with. He's a really hard-working kid. His story is going to be told, and I wrote this earlier, but it's going to be told over and over again. If this kid develops into an NFL-type talent like his high school coach thinks that he could, he's a kid that in June took a Greyhound bus from Memphis to get to Ohio State for a one-night camp in Columbus, and because his mom couldn't make the trip. So he spent $300 of his own money and took an 18-hour round-trip bus ride to try and audition for a scholarship from Ohio State. And he earned his scholarship that night, and a month later, here he is as commitment number 15 in the Buckeyes 2019 class. And, yeah, the rankings are a little lower on him. He's the 36th ranked tight end in the country, but he does have an offer from Ohio State, does have an offer from Alabama, Ole Miss, Tennessee. So I think a lot of the ranking stuff is a byproduct basically of his size. He's only 6'2" and about 250 pounds, so he's not your prototype tight end body, but the Buckeyes really liked what they see out of him on tape and just his commitment to the game and wanting to get better.
That is a great story, by the way. I mean, somebody putting that investment in them, investing in themselves, right?
Oh, he's hungry. He's betting on himself, and he's hungry. And if he's the tight end that I saw at Friday Night Lights flying around the field, he's worth the scholarship. There was one kid there, and it would have to be him, that he stood out amongst everybody else running routes. And he ran him as a tight end, and he could run.
Go ahead, Jeremy.
He doesn't look the part, but he certainly has the measurables outside of the 6'2" or 6'3" that he checks in at. He's in that 250 range already. To me, and the comparison I've made was that I think he's coming into Ohio State. I think he'll be a little bit heavier version of a Noah Brown because he is not a guy that's going to burn the corners on 9 routes or anything like that. But he's certainly strong enough to make life difficult for safeties and fast enough to really be a problem for linebackers.
Visiting with Jeremy Birmingham, Letterman Row, a Buckeye commitment today. Cormonte Hamilton, a tight end out of Tennessee, the 15th commitment in this 2019 class. And it seems like, I mean, I'm following people on Twitter, and like every day it's like, oh, there should be an announcement now, should be an announcement in the next few days. Who's next for this 2019 class? Who does the Buckeye staff and who should Buckeye fans have their eye on that might be the next in the fold for this Ohio State class?
I think, unfortunately, for most Buckeye fans, the name I'm not going to say is Zach Harrison, the 5-star defensive end from Olympia Orange High School. Zach, there's still a little bit of a delay as far as when that's going to happen. There's no specific date for him. The next one that we know that I think will commit to Ohio State is going to be a defensive back named Peyton Powell from Odessa, Texas. He's at Permian High School, the famed high school of Friday Night Lights. He plays quarterback now for Permian, but he's a cornerback target for Ohio State, and he'll make his announcement on August 13th. And that's the next one that they think is kind of in the plan. Obviously, there's always the opportunity for somebody to sneak up and surprise you. The Buckeyes will find out on August 7th where they stand with St. Louis wide receiver Marcus Washington. I think that one's trending away from them and heading more toward him staying at home with Missouri. But right now the Buckeyes have the number 1 ranked class in the Big Ten, the 6th best class in the country. And it's not a great class nationally. So what they're doing is really looking for kids that fit the program character-wise and personality-wise. And that's why a guy like Cormonte Hamilton, despite the lower ranking, and I know Buckeye fans are star chasers like a lot of people are. But again, as I said, if you have an offer from Ohio State and you have an offer from Alabama, and you earned both of those by going to camp in earning it in front of Nick Saban and Urban Meyer, that's all fans should really need to know about Cormonte Hamilton.
In terms of Zach Harrison, who, Central Ohio football fans know all about, and heck, Central Ohio track fans know all about, he's so big and fast. I think people look at it, Jeremy, he's Central Ohio kid. Boy, he's got to be a Buckeye commitment eventually and going to sign with Ohio State. Is that the vibe you get, or does he not put off any kind of a vibe? Is he hard to read what he's thinking?
Zach is one of the more difficult kids to cover that I've covered in the 8 years I've been covering recruiting. And it's not because he tries to be. It's not a game that he's playing. It's not like he's a kid who loves the theatrics and the dramatics of this modern era of recruiting. He's just a very private kid who doesn't really show his emotions and doesn't wear his heart on his sleeve. He grew up a Buckeye fan, and he'll admit that, but at this point in his life, he's thinking about what the best potential outcome for him is in college, and that doesn't always necessarily include football. And you know, you're talking about a kid that really wants relationships, and he has his best relationship with the head coach is with Urban Meyer. His best relationship with a position coach is Larry Johnson. There's 1,000 reasons why Ohio State makes the most sense for him, but he is a kid who's not going to announce it until he's ready, and as soon as he's ready, he'll announce it. So that's, I think, the difference between a player like Harrison and a guy like Jackson Carman from a year ago, who obviously was a five-star player who opted to go away from Ohio and went down to Clemson. Jack was a player that really wanted to draw it out and make it about him, and Zach Harrison is not that kid. So I think people need to appreciate him as a person and know that as soon as he's ready, he'll make his decision.
Visiting with Jeremy Birmingham, Letterman Row, talking about Ohio State recruiting. I want to go back a couple days because they did get in the 2020 class this Darvon Hubbard, who, Jeremy, he's originally from Ohio, like an Akron kid, correct?
Correct. He's an Akron guy. He moved to Scottsdale, Arizona after his freshman season of high school, where he now is lining up in the backfield at Chaparral High School with Jack Miller, Ohio State's 2020 quarterback commitment. So Darvon was offered after his visit for Friday Night Lights. He actually camped in Columbus twice last month, camping with the Buckeyes twice in a one-week stretch during a visit home. And he's a guy that the Buckeyes really were observing closely for the last year, but you weren't sure if they were going to be ready to pull the trigger on an offer. You started to see schools like Georgia and LSU and Alabama really start to make a push, especially Georgia. And I think the Buckeyes decided at the end of last week that they were ready to lock that one down, and that happened midweek this week with Darvon calling, FaceTiming Urban Meyer from his Wednesday night practice and committing with Jack Miller right by his side. So those two got 7 years or so of lining up in the same backfield together, and that's pretty exciting for a running back and a quarterback to consider.
Jeremy, the most important part of the Zach Smith story is the family that's involved and whatever's going on in their family life, and you hope that that gets figured out for the kids that are involved. However, there is a football side of it, and we saw how Ohio State addressed it in terms of a receiving coach and at least in the interim, Brian Hartline. But one of Zach Smith's strengths was his ability to recruit. I mean, there's a number of star players that are here because Zach Smith was the lead recruiter on them. It is. Let me ask you, do you feel like there is any concern in Ohio State's faction that this could have a negative recruiting effect on them? Not only the story itself, but also that was something that Zach did very well.
Well, I mean, I think there's obviously a concern because, again, he was there for the entire time that Urban Meyer's been in Columbus, so the familiarity's there, the comfort's there. He was very well respected and known down in the South Florida area, especially at St. Thomas Aquinas High School, where he was the lead recruiter. As far as what Zach does as a coach and how he is able to develop his players, I think that Brian Hartline, whether in the interim or in the long term, is a player, as a former NFL player that can match that. I think the biggest challenge will be just the energy put into recruiting, and that's something that is yet to be seen. This week, though, Hartline has reached out to all of the Buckeyes' top wide receiver targets, and everyone I've spoken to was really pleased with the way that he spoke to them, the energy he brought, the NFL experience. And so I don't think that you can replace Zach Smith that quickly, similar to how the Buckeyes have been forced to try to replace Kerry Coombs this offseason. You're talking about two of the staff's elite recruiters. So it's going to take time for these new guys to get acclimated. But with Hartline, the benefit is he's already been in the program as a coach in the quality control role for the last year. And as a former player at Ohio State, it's much easier to sell the program when you're that intimately aware of it. And I don't think long-term there's any repercussions for Ohio State with that switch.
All right. Good stuff, Jeremy. Really appreciate you taking a few minutes for us, and good work today. I enjoyed reading your stuff. Appreciate it.